Well, let's start with people who are still, maybe they've just filed or maybe they're considering filing, but people who are still in the midst of divorce. I get a lot of questions from those people asking, like, how do I file? What are my options? So, how would you answer that?
How much time do we have? No,
We could be
I
here for
know.
hours.
We can, but I won't do that to you guys. Okay. So let's say you're still married. Okay. You're not legally separated or anything. It depends if you like your ex to be or you don't like your ex to be. So if you like your ex to be, then you could file marrying filing jointly, marrying filing joint. Okay. Two together because you're going to get a lot of the credits and bonuses and all those good things that come with that. If you don't like your ex to be, you could do marrying filing separate. Now, marrying filing separate is a whole, it's not just doing two separate returns. You lose a lot of the credit. So if you have kiddos, some of the kid credits you're not going to get. Okay, so that's something to keep an eye out. Now, if your ex to be, you don't like your ex to be, you guys don't get along, and your ex to be has not lived with you, okay, in the last 6 months, and you are legally separated, so you're not divorced yet, but you're legally separated, you can do head of household if you have somebody dependent on you, financially dependent on you, living in the house, okay, like a kid, a parent. There's other rules, so don't say she said my mom and assume that that's the case. Okay, so I'm just giving you information to kind of dig deeper into that or talk to a tax professional. Now, okay, so I think you're going to go to this next question. After the divorce.
Well, before we go there,
Okay.
I have some more questions about mid divorce. So I think it helps, like, I don't know. I don't know a lot of divorcing people who like each other that much. So I think it's important to make the distinction between I don't think you have to like them, but if you can respect each other enough to be able to communicate, and there's a certain amount of collaboration when you're filing taxes with someone. I mean, just think about how it was when you were married, but if you're able to do that and not
Kill
go
each other when you're talking to your tax professional.
exactly, I feel like maybe you don't have to like them, but just have a good enough relationship to where you guys can accomplish something together.
And
Would you
maybe it's just,
agree?
yeah, and maybe it just looks like you giving your documents to your the tax professional, and your ex to be giving their documents to that, same tax
Yeah, yeah.
professional. You don't have to sit there and
Hold hands.
make googly eyes, right? Like we know that's not going to happen, but don't be fighting tax professionals. It's so uncomfortable. We never know what to do. We're like, oh,
I feel bad for you.
please don't do that. Don't do that to me. But I mean, I work with all my clients online. So everybody uploads their stuff to their online portal.
Yeah.
And so you could do something like that. You know, the review, that would be nice if you could be on a Zoom call together on a review, but you're muted, and we could do reviews separate. The thing you have to remember is the IRS doesn't care where the money is going. The IRS is just, if you get a refund, the IRS is just going to say, okay, give me a bank account. Here you go. Here's the money in the bank account. So now you guys have to talk to each other and say, who's going to get what money? Are you splitting it? Are you, that's something you guys have to talk about,
Yeah.
how that looks like.
Yeah. That's probably where the relationship gets extra important. So I've
And
known,
actually, Rachel, can I interrupt? It
yeah,
actually gets even more extra important when there's a balance due, because now you really have to talk to each other and say who's paying what. So when
yeah,
I got a
yeah,
divorce, we had a balance due, and he's like, I'm not paying it. So who paid it? Me.
yeah.
So just know that could be a situation if there's a
That's
balance.
a that's a really good point. Because I've known plenty of people who were able to file taxes together even when they're separated. Each person kind of contacted their tax preparer, and there wasn't a lot of collaboration involved. But I didn't really think about it. if you guys owe money, and if it's going to be a major problem, coming up with a plan for how you're going to handle that, then maybe filing jointly is not a great option for you, whether you're owing or whether you're getting a balance back, because you're going to be putting a bank account on your, your direct deposit information if you're getting money back. And it's, the IRS doesn't care. The IRS doesn't want any part of your drama. They're just like, tell us where to send the money. And it's up to you guys to figure it out. And like your situation, if you're filing jointly, even if your ex is like, I'm not paying $1, you're filing jointly. So it's your responsibility too. And so you can't just tell the IRS, oh no, he
go
owes
collect
that.
on his. It's his half. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. They'll collect it from whoever they could collect it from. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's a good reason to just like be extra nice to your ex around tax season. Don't like, send them any nasty text messages. Maybe everyone should just kind of stay on their best behavior
until the balance paid. And until the balance is paid.
Exactly. That's a good point. And you mentioned the potential of doing head of household. So when you were married, and legal, you said legal separation, and I wanted to clarify that a little bit, because when you say, okay, we're getting divorced, and you file or whatever, even before you file, you can be separated. And from the court's perspective, like, this is the day that you separated. That's the day that you threw all their clothes out on the lawn and set it on fire or something. That's the day that you're separated. You didn't file for legal separation on that date. That was just the day that your marriage was not going to move forward. Legal separation is something very different, and it's something that people think is an option, but it's kind of something that's not done very often at all, because, and I won't get into that, but you don't have to be, but when you said that you had to be legally separated in order to file head of household, that doesn't mean, oh, we just filed and now we're separated. It's like, no, that's like a whole different legal path.
It's a court approved.
Yes. And so filing head of household before you're divorced is like a more complicated thing. But generally, when people are still legally married, I mean, until your divorce is final, you're still legally married, and you only have the options of either married filing jointly or married filing separately, or in very, very special circumstances, head of household.
Yes.
Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay.
And head of household, there's a ton of tax law tied to it. So a few key items, if you are legally separated, so you got your court document, this is that you're legally separated, your to-be ex cannot have lived with you in the last 6 months. So if it was the beginning of the year, they came back in November for the holidays, that's it. It messed it up.
Yeah. So don't let them back in.
Don't let them live with you. Just stay until we file our taxes, please. Because otherwise you can't do head of household. And head of household, you have to have a dependent. Could be a relative dependent, it could be a child dependent, or it could be a non-family dependent, but they have to live with you this person has to live with you for the last 6 months, 6 months, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot, and that's very simplified. Head of household is highly, the IRS has their eyeballs on head of household because it's a very coveted status. It gives you a lot of perks, perks in a way. You're getting a lot of the benefits, the tax credits and stuff, but being single, quote unquote single, right?
Yeah. So then once the divorce is finalized, then what are their options at that point for filing?
So let's go if you're still not divorced, because if you're not divorced, you're not legally separated. Okay. You would do marrying, filing separate. Okay. You would do marrying, filing separate because you can't get along. You don't want to do your return together. Marrying, filing separate is least favorable because you miss out on a lot of the tax credits. You don't get them. So you're still legally married, but you're going to do it separately. Sometimes that would be an example, like somebody they can't find their spouse. They just went MIA.
That's a real thing.
Yeah, yeah, totally. You would do marrying filing separate, so you're technically married, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you lose a lot of the tax credits. And if the first person itemized and they file the return, the second person has to itemize, even though you might have $20 to itemize. So you lose out on the standard deduction.
That is a huge deal.
Big deal.
And a lot of people don't understand the difference between itemizing and taking the standard deduction, which we won't necessarily get into that, but who files first matters.
Yes.
Not filing together. It majorly matters. So
it matters. And I'm this is not a promotion to do this, but whoever files first and they put the kids on the return, if the second one files and they add that same kid, that return gets rejected. It says, sorry, the kid's already been claimed. So like the person, and I'm not promoting rush out and do your taxes on January 15th or whenever the IRS opens their availability. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. But it does. It does. It does.
Yeah, it is good to know that it majorly matters who goes first.
And for the IRS, there is rules on who can claim their kid. And there's a tie break rule. If it's tie break, then what's the next level? So there is IRS, and that's assuming that you guys can't figure it out.
Yeah.
So the IRS will figure it out for you.
Yeah. And we probably don't want that. It's probably better to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's that point.
Yeah. And some people do one kid 1 year and then the other parent claims the kid the other year. So there's a switching and there's different techniques, but
there's some creativity that can be had there. One thing I did want to mention, like, I don't see very many people married or separated who benefit from filing separately. I'm not giving tax advice. I'm just saying, in my experience, I haven't seen too many situations like that, but there are certain one-off situations where it makes sense to file married filing separately. If one person has a giant student loan balance and they're on some sort of income-driven repayment plan, sometimes it benefits them to file separately. There's like one-off situations like that. So just, you don't need to be a tax expert. I don't need to be a tax expert either. I have Randa, but like that's why I think it's extra important to go to a tax preparer and it's someone who's an expert in this stuff, especially when it comes time for divorce, because there's some complicated stuff that we're not necessarily going to be thinking about.
Yeah. And we have the capability to prep the return, not file it, just prep it, and then split it out and see how would it look like if we did marrying filing separate before we file it.
Yeah.
And then is it better for the household to do married filing separate?
Yeah. So you can like quickly run it both ways, right? And say,
totally.
Hey, this one looks better.
Yeah. Quickly. I mean,
relatively quickly.
Yeah. I don't want it's not like a button. Okay, your return is done. Here you go. Yeah. But yes, quickly.
Okay. Should we move on to post-divorce?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what are people's options at that point once divorce is finalized?
So the first thing you have to do is your divorce party. And then after your divorce party,
you call Randa and I will bring the wine.
Totally. And the snacks, don't forget the snacks. So after the divorce party, now you have two options. If you have a dependent or you don't have dependent, that's what it's going to be based on. If you don't have a dependent, then you just do the single status. If you do have a dependent, then you're going to do head of household.
Maybe.
Yeah. And the dependent, thank you, Rachel. Yeah. Disclaimer, it has to be a kid or a family relative or somebody who's living with you last 6 months. Yeah.
Okay.
And you have to support them more than half the amount, right? So there's a lot of more rules, but high level. Yeah.
And I think one thing that we talked about earlier, before we were recording, is it's really important. So when we were saying before the date that your divorce is, it's whatever your marital status is on New Year's Eve. It's the last day of the year. That's the year, or I'm sorry, whatever your status is on New Year's Eve, that's your assumed marital status for that whole tax year. Mm-hmm. So if your divorce is finalized December 1st, even though you were legally married 11 months, on the last day of the year, you are a single person. So that's the date that's like the super important date.
Yeah,
Is what's your
12/31.
Yep.
What are you at 12/31?
Yep.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the date.
and then once the divorce is finalized, then then they don't need to worry about like, oh, I got to file first because I'm going to itemize and that's it. Like that doesn't matter. But the kids claiming the kids does, right?
Yeah, claiming the kids does because it goes by Social Security. And so a lot of the IRS stuff is electronic and there's checks and balances when we send the return in. So it does its automatic checks and balances. So it could get kicked back. So that is regardless what status you file.
Okay, that's good to know. So when you're going to claim a kid, you have to put in their social security number.
Oh, yes, yes.
And the electronic system is smart enough to know someone already claimed this kid.
Yeah, totally. Or you already filed a return. That's another thing you want to watch out for.
Oh,
I mean, just that comes back like somebody's using your social. Like
yeah,
so
that's a good like fraud alert.
totally the system already knows, it does its basic checks and balances on that.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Mhm.
Well, um, anything else that you'd like to add?
I think that's it. That was a lot of information.
Yeah, we
And
could
that's
talk for a long, long, long time about all the particulars, but I think
gladly.
I think understanding that when you're in the middle of a divorce, you have a couple of options. You don't have a ton of options. Some people think that they can just do all sorts of things, but it's like, nope, you can choose one of these ways. And it matters which one you choose. So talk to a tax preparer and find out which is the best option. And same with once your divorce is finalized. When you're a single person, your tax situation is probably going to look quite a bit different than when you're married. So even if like you were doing your own taxes before as a married couple, I think especially when you're a newly single person, get some help on your taxes, do some strategizing, do some tax planning, because there might be some different things you can do to help your tax situation going forward. And really smart people like Randa can help us with that.
Totally. Especially, you know what, honestly, Rachel, especially the first year,
Yeah.
because it's so different. And just to understand, not necessarily, maybe your tax is very simple, you have one W-2, but to understand like tips and tricks, I always call them tips and tricks. There's so many little tips and tricks, like at least get that
Yeah.
basic knowledge,
Yeah.
you know?
I'd agree.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, if anyone wants to reach out to Randa, which I very much recommend that they do, I'm going to include all of your details in the
Awesome.
description. And thank you for
Yeah.
chatting with me.
Thank you. Thanks,
All
Rachel. I
right.
really appreciate it. See you guys.
Bye.